The emergency dispatcher received the 911 call at 3:22 a.m. on November 15, 2023, from a neighbor reporting screams coming from the Morrison house on Elm Street in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. When police arrived at the two-story colonial home, they found the front door standing wide open and blood spatter across the entryway walls. Inside, they discovered 14-year-old Nathan Morrison's body in the basement, bound with electrical cord and showing signs of prolonged torture. The victim's mother, 38-year-old Diana Morrison, was found unconscious in the kitchen with severe head trauma. She had been beaten with a baseball bat that was left beside her body, the weapon covered in blood and fingerprints. The perpetrator had fled the scene, leaving behind evidence that would expose one of the most disturbing family secrets in the SMI. Town's history. What police didn't initially realize was that Nathan Morrison had been systematically tortured for hours before his death. The medical examiner would later determine that he had been subjected to cigarette burns, knife wounds, and blunt force trauma over a period of at least 4 hours. The basement had been converted into what could only be described as a torture chamber, complete with restraints, weapons, and recording equipment. The investigation would reveal that Nathan's killer was someone he knew, intimately someone who had been living in the Morrison house for months while conducting a campaign of psychological and physical abuse. The perpetrator was 16-year-old Marcus Webb, who had been Nathan's school bully for 3 years. But Marcus wasn't just a random intruder who had broken into the house that night. He was Diana Morrison's secret husband, a relationship that had been hidden from Nathan, and the entire community got the marriage certificate, found hidden in Diana's bedroom, showed that she had married Marcus Webb in a private ceremony 6 months earlier, when he was still 15 years old. The document revealed that Diana had been granted legal guardianship of Marcus after his parents died in a car accident, and she had used this authority to marry him in a neighboring state where such arrangements were legal under specific circumstances. Millbrook, Pennsylvania, was a quiet suburban town of 8,500 residents located 30 miles outside of Philadelphia. The community was known for its excellent schools, low crime rate, and close-knit neighborhoods where families had lived for generations. The Morrison family had been part of this community for over a decade, living in a modest 2-story house on Elm Street in one of the town's most established neighborhoods. Diana Morrison, 38, worked as a nurse at Millbrook General Hospital and had been raising her son, Nathan, as a single mother since her husband's death in a military deployment 5 years earlier. Diana was known in the community as a dedicated mother who volunteered at Nathan's school and participated in local charity events. She had never remarried and was considered a pillar of the community. Nathan Morrison, 14, was an 8th grader at Millbrook Middle School who struggled with bullying and had difficulty making friends. He was a quiet, intelligent boy who excelled academically, but was often targeted by older students due to his small stature and introverted personality. Nathan had been receiving counseling for anxiety and depression related to his experiences at school. Marcus Webb, 16, was a sophomore at Millbrook High School who had developed a reputation as a violent bully with a history of disciplinary problems. He had been suspended multiple times for fighting, theft, and threatening other students. Marcus had been living in foster care since his parents died in a car accident 18 months earlier, and he had been bounced between several different homes due to his behavioral issues. The connection between the Morrison family and Marcus Webb had begun 6 months earlier when Diana Morrison applied to become Marcus's foster parent. Diana had claimed that she wanted to help a troubled teenager who reminded her of her late husband. The foster care system had approved the placement despite Marcus's history of violence. Impressed by Diana's credentials as a healthcare professional and her clean background check, the violence at the Morrison house began at approximately 11 o'clock p.m. on November 14, 2023. when Marcus Webb initiated what would become a 4-hour torture session targeting Nathan Morrison. Security footage from a neighbor's camera showed Marcus entering the house through the back door using his own key, indicating that this was not a break-in, but rather the actions of someone with legitimate access to the property. Marcus had been waiting for Diana Morrison to fall asleep before beginning his attack on Nathan. He had been monitoring Diana's sleep patterns for weeks, using his knowledge of her work schedule and sleep medication to choose the optimal time for his assault. Marcus had prepared for the attack by converting the basement into a torture chamber, installing restraints and gathering weapons over the course of several days. The attack began when Marcus entered Nathan's bedroom and used a stun gun to incapacitate him. He then dragged Nathan to the basement, where he had prepared a series of torture devices, including knives, cigarette lighters, and electrical cords. Marcus had been planning this assault for weeks, gathering materials and preparing the basement, while Diana was at work. The torture session lasted approximately 4 hours, during which Marcus subjected Nathan to systematic physical and psychological abuse. He used cigarette lighters to burn Nathan's skin, knives to create shallow cuts across his body, and electrical cords to deliver shocks. Marcus had been recording the entire session using multiple cameras he had set up throughout the basement. Nathan's screams during the torture session were heard by neighbors, who initially dismissed them as sounds from a television or video game. The screams became more intense around 2:30 a.m. when Marcus began using more severe methods of torture. Several neighbors later reported hearing what sounded like someone pleading for help, but none of them called police until the sounds became unbearable. The murder occurred at approximately 3:10 a.m. when Marcus strangled Nathan with an electrical cord after hours of torture. The medical examiner would later determine that Nathan had been conscious throughout most of the ordeal and had died from asphyxiation. Marcus had positioned cameras to record Nathan's final moments, apparently planning to use the footage for his own entertainment. After killing Nathan, Marcus went upstairs to find Diana Morrison, who had been awakened by the sounds of the torture session. Diana had been attempting to call 911 when Marcus attacked her with a baseball bat, striking her multiple times in the head and leaving her unconscious but alive. The attack on Diana appeared to be intended to prevent her from calling for help. Rather than to kill her, Marcus then attempted to clean up evidence of his crimes, using bleach to remove blood from the basement and destroying some of the recording equipment. However, he was interrupted by the arrival of police, who had been called by neighbors reporting the screams. Marcus fled through the back door, leaving behind crucial evidence that would link him to the murders. The crime scene revealed the extent of Marcus's preparation and planning. The basement had been systematically converted into a torture chamber over a period of weeks, with restraints bolted to the walls and multiple weapons arranged for easy access. The level of preparation suggested that Marcus had been planning this attack for months, not acting on impulse. Physical evidence at the scene included Marcus's fingerprints on the murder weapons, his DNA on the restraints used to bind Nathan, and his personal belongings scattered throughout the basement. Marcus had also left behind a journal detailing his plans for the torture session, including specific methods he wanted to use and his intentions to record the entire assault. The investigation of the immediate crime scene revealed that Marcus had been living in the Morrison house for 6 months while conducting a campaign of psychological abuse against Nathan. The basement showed evidence of previous torture sessions, with bloodstains and damage that indicated Marcus had been escalating his violence over time. Detective Lisa Rodriguez arrived at the Morrison house at 3:45 a.m. and immediately recognized the severity of the crime scene. The systematic nature of the torture, the evidence of long-term planning, and the relationship between the perpetrator and victim suggested a complex case that would require extensive investigation. Rodriguez ordered a complete forensic examination of the house and began searching for Marcus Webb who had been identified as the primary suspect. The investigation began with examining the relationship between Diana Morrison and Marcus Webb. Detective Rodriguez discovered that Diana had been granted legal guardianship of Marcus 6 months earlier after his parents died in a car accident. However, the investigation revealed that Diana had been in contact with Marcus for over a year before becoming his guardian, communicating with him through social media and private messages. Analysis of Diana's computer and phone records revealed that she had been grooming Marcus for months before taking him into her home. The communications showed that Diana had been encouraging Marcus's violent behavior and had been providing him with detailed information about Nathan's vulnerabilities and fears. Diana had been actively participating in the psychological abuse of her own son. The most shocking discovery came when Detective Rodriguez found the marriage certificate hidden in Diana's bedroom. The document showed that Diana had married Marcus Webb in a private ceremony in Delaware, where 16-year-olds could marry with parental consent. Diana had used her legal guardianship to provide this consent, essentially arranging her own marriage to a minor who was in her care. The investigation revealed that Diana and Marcus had been conducting their relationship in secret for 6 months. While living in the same house as Nathan, they had been careful to hide their sexual relationship from Nathan and the community, maintaining the appearance of a foster parent-child relationship while actually functioning as husband and wife behind closed doors. Detective Rodriguez discovered that Diana had been aware of Marcus's torture and abuse of Nathan, but had done nothing to stop it. Security cameras hidden throughout the house showed Diana observing Marcus's treatment of Nathan on multiple occasions, including incidents where Marcus had physically assaulted Nathan while Diana watched from the doorway. The investigation also revealed that Diana had been drugging Nathan with sedatives to make him more vulnerable to Marcus's attacks. Medical tests on Nathan's body showed the presence of prescription sleep medication that had been administered regularly over the course of several months. Diana had been using her medical knowledge to facilitate the abuse of her own son. Phone records and digital evidence showed that Diana and Marcus had been planning Nathan's murder for weeks before the attack. Text messages between them discussed the specific methods of torture and killing, with Diana providing medical advice about how to prolong Nathan's suffering without causing immediate death. The messages revealed that Diana had been an active participant in planning her son's murder. The investigation uncovered evidence that Marcus had been filming his abuse of Nathan and sharing the footage with Diana. The videos showed progressively more severe forms of torture, suggesting that Marcus and Diana had been escalating their violence over time. The footage also showed Diana's presence during some of the abuse, confirming her direct involvement in the crimes. Detective Rodriguez discovered that Diana had been stealing medication from the hospital where she worked, using the drugs to sedate Nathan and to treat Marcus's injuries from his violent activities. The theft had been ongoing for months, with Diana taking pain medication, sedatives, and other controlled substances from the hospital pharmacy. The investigation revealed that Marcus had been using his relationship with Diana to gain access to other potential victims. He had been using Diana's position in the community to identify vulnerable children and had been planning to expand his activities beyond Nathan. Diana had been providing him with information about other families in the community and had been helping him plan future attacks. Financial records showed that Diana had been providing Marcus with money and resources to support his violent activities. She had been buying him weapons, recording equipment, and other materials needed for his torture sessions. Diana had also been paying for a storage unit where Marcus kept additional weapons and evidence of his crimes. The investigation also uncovered evidence that Diana had been planning to stage Nathan's death as a suicide or accident. She had been researching methods of covering up murders and had been preparing false evidence to support alternative explanations for Nathan's death. Diana had been planning to use her medical knowledge to make Nathan's murder appear to be the result of self-harm or accidental death. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Detective Rodriguez discovered that Diana Morrison was not actually Nathan's biological mother. DNA testing revealed that Nathan had been kidnapped as an infant from a hospital in Ohio, where Diana had been working as a nurse 14 years earlier. Diana had stolen Nathan from the hospital nursery and had been raising him as her own child. While maintaining a false identity, the discovery of Nathan's true identity led to the shocking revelation that Diana Morrison was actually Linda Shaw, a former nurse who had been wanted by the FBI for child abduction since 2009. Linda had created a false identity for herself and Nathan, moving to Pennsylvania and establishing a new life while evading law enforcement for over a decade. Further, investigation revealed that Linda Shaw had a history of obsessive behavior and had been involved in multiple cases of child abuse throughout her career. She had been fired from 3 different hospitals for inappropriate conduct with patients and had been suspected of causing harm to children in her care. Her theft of Nathan had been the culmination of years of escalating criminal behavior. Investigation also uncovered evidence that Marcus Webb was not the troubled foster child he appeared to be. Digital forensics revealed that Marcus had been running a sophisticated child exploitation network, using his relationship with Diana to gain access to vulnerable children throughout the community. He had been producing and distributing child abuse material for over 2 years. Perhaps most shocking was the discovery that Diana and Marcus had been operating a child trafficking ring from the Morrison house. The basement torture chamber had been used to abuse multiple children over the course of several months, with Diana using her position at the hospital to identify potential victims and Marcus using his school connections to gain access to them. The investigation revealed that at least 12 other children had been abused in the Morrison house basement over the previous 6 months. DNA evidence and video recordings found in the house showed that Diana and Marcus had been systematically abusing children from the local community, using threats and violence to ensure their silence. Detective Rodriguez discovered that Diana had been using her medical knowledge to keep the child victims alive during prolonged torture sessions. She had been providing medical treatment to the children to ensure they survived the abuse, allowing Marcus to continue his attacks over extended periods. Diana's medical expertise had been crucial to the success of their criminal operation. The investigation also revealed that Diana and Marcus had been planning to expand their operation to other communities. They had been researching potential locations for new bases of operation and had been in contact with other individuals involved in child trafficking networks. The Morrison house had been intended as the first location in a larger criminal enterprise. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that Diana had been documenting the abuse for research purposes. She had been keeping detailed medical records of the torture sessions, apparently studying the effects of prolonged abuse on child victims. Diana had been treating the children as subjects in a twisted medical experiment. The investigation uncovered evidence that Diana had been selling access to the child victims to other predators in the community. She had been running a sophisticated operation that allowed paying customers to participate in the abuse of children in the Morrison house basement. Several prominent community members were identified as clients in this operation. Digital evidence showed that Diana had been planning to kill Nathan for months, not as a result of Marcus's influence, but as part of a larger plan to eliminate witnesses to their criminal activities. Nathan's murder had been intended to silence him permanently and to allow Diana and Marcus to continue their operation without fear of exposure. Diana Morrison, whose real name was Linda Shaw, was arrested at the hospital where she was recovering from her injuries on November 20th, 2023. She was charged with first-degree murder, child abduction, human trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. Marcus Webb was captured 3 days later, hiding in an abandoned warehouse, and was charged with first-degree murder, torture, and multiple counts of child abuse. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Robert, sought the death penalty for both defendants, arguing that the systematic nature of their crimes and the torture of multiple victims warranted the maximum punishment available. The case was complicated by the fact that Marcus was a minor at the time of the crimes, requiring special procedures for his prosecution. The trial began on June 3, 2024, with Linda Shaw's defense attorney, Patricia Williams, arguing that her client had been manipulated and coerced by Marcus Webb. Williams claimed that Linda had been a victim of domestic violence and had been forced to participate in the crimes against her will. However, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of Linda's active participation in planning and executing the crimes. Marcus Webb's defense attorney, Michael Rodriguez, argued that his client was mentally ill and had been influenced by Linda Shaw's medical knowledge and authority. Rodriguez presented expert testimony about the effects of childhood trauma on Marcus's development, arguing that his experiences in foster care had contributed to his violent behavior. The prosecution presented evidence of the extensive child trafficking operation that Linda and Marcus had been running from the Morrison house. They showed the jury video recordings of the abuse, medical records documenting the torture sessions, and financial records showing payments from clients who had participated in the abuse of children. The trial revealed the full scope of the criminal enterprise, with testimony from 12 child victims who had been abused in the Morrison house basement. The victims, ranging in age from 8 to 14, provided detailed accounts of the systematic torture and abuse they had endured at the hands of Linda and Marcus. Expert witnesses testified about the sophisticated nature of the child trafficking operation, explaining how Linda and Marcus had used their positions in the community to identify and access vulnerable children. The prosecution showed how Linda's medical knowledge had been used to facilitate prolonged torture sessions and how Marcus's school connections had provided access to victims. The defense struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence against both defendants. While they were able to present evidence of both defendants' troubled backgrounds, they could not explain away the extensive planning and coordination that had gone into the crimes. The video evidence and victim testimony provided undeniable proof of their guilt. The trial lasted 14 weeks, with testimony from over 80 witnesses. The prosecution presented evidence of Linda's true identity and her history of child abduction, while also documenting the extensive abuse that had occurred in the Morrison house. The jury heard graphic testimony about the torture and murder of Nathan Morrison, as well as the abuse of the other child victims. The jury deliberated for 12 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges for both defendants. Linda Shaw was sentenced to death for the murder of Nathan Morrison, with additional life sentences for the child trafficking charges. Marcus Webb was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with the judge noting that his age at the time of the crimes prevented the imposition of the death penalty. The case of Linda Shaw and Marcus Webb exposed one of the most disturbing child abuse operations in Pennsylvania's history, revealing how trusted community members can use their positions to facilitate horrific crimes against children. The systematic nature of their operation and the extent of their planning showed how predators can operate undetected in small communities. The investigation led to the identification and rescue of 12 child victims who had been systematically abused over the course of several months. The case resulted in significant changes to foster care procedures and hospital security protocols designed to prevent similar crimes in the future. The community of Millbrook struggled to understand how such extensive criminal activity could have occurred without detection. The case shattered the town's sense of security and led to increased vigilance and reporting of suspicious activities. Many families moved away from the area following the trial, unable to cope with the trauma of learning about the crimes that had been committed in their neighborhood. The case also highlighted the vulnerability of children in foster care and the need for better screening and monitoring of foster parents. Linda Shaw's ability to use her medical credentials and clean background check to gain access to Marcus Webb demonstrated the limitations of current safety measures. The discovery that Nathan Morrison had been a kidnapped child added another layer of tragedy to the case, reuniting him posthumously with his biological family while exposing the extent of Linda Shaw's criminal history. The case led to renewed efforts to solve cold cases involving missing children and to improve hospital security measures. The story of Linda Shaw and Marcus Webb serves as a reminder that the most dangerous predators are often those who appear most trustworthy and who use their positions of authority to gain access to vulnerable victims. Their ability to maintain the appearance of a normal family life while operating a sophisticated criminal enterprise demonstrates the importance of vigilance and the need for robust systems to protect children from abuse. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of systematic child abuse in recent history, illustrating how predators can exploit institutional weaknesses and community trust to commit horrific crimes against the most vulnerable members of society.